Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a complex but important topic, corruption around the world. While corruption exists in almost every country, some nations face deeply ingrained issues that impact their economies, societies, and governments in particularly severe ways. For this video, we'll be looking at the top 5 most corrupt countries based on global corruption indices, which measure things like bribery, embezzlement, and misuse of public office. This video is meant to provide an informative look at these countries to understand how corruption affects citizens, economies, and governments. Let's get started. Starting off our list at number 5, we have Venezuela. Corruption in Venezuela has been a long-standing issue, particularly over the past few decades. Venezuela, once one of Latin America's wealthiest nations, thanks to its vast oil reserves, has seen political instability, economic collapse, and widespread corruption that has impacted nearly every level of society. The core of Venezuela's corruption issues lies in the political and economic structure. During the presidency of Hugo Chavez, oil wealth became concentrated in the hands of a few, with little accountability or transparency. This trend continued under President Nicolas Maduro, leading to a situation where government officials and their allies controlled major sectors of the economy, including oil, food distribution, and currency exchange. Bribery, cronyism, and nepotism have become common, with billions of dollars reportedly siphoned out of the country. The impact on Venezuelan citizens has been severe. Hyperinflation, food shortages, and lack of medical supplies are just a few of the crises fueled by corruption. The country's infrastructure has deteriorated, and essential services are failing. For many Venezuelans, basic necessities are often out of reach, creating a humanitarian crisis that has forced millions to leave the country in search of better opportunities. At number 4, we have Afghanistan. Afghanistan's long history of political instability, war, and foreign intervention has contributed to its deep-seated issues with corruption. Following the 2001 U.S.-led intervention, billions of dollars in foreign aid poured into Afghanistan, but much of it fell victim to corruption. Inadequate oversight, weak governance structures, and a lack of accountability created an environment where bribery and embezzlement became common. One of the biggest issues in Afghanistan has been the misuse of foreign aid funds. Large sums were allocated to reconstruction and development projects, but without robust monitoring, much of the money was misused or diverted to corrupt officials and warlords. Furthermore, the Afghan drug trade has played a major role in fueling corruption. Afghanistan is one of the world's largest producers of opium, and the profits from the drug trade often end up in the hands of corrupt officials and organized crime groups. The effects of corruption are felt deeply by the Afghan people. Many citizens are forced to pay bribes for basic services, such as healthcare, education, and even protection from law enforcement. Corruption has undermined public trust in government institutions, contributing to a cycle of poverty, insecurity, and instability. Next at number 3 is South Sudan. As one of the world's youngest nations, South Sudan has struggled with corruption since it gained independence in 2011. The country's vast oil resources have unfortunately become a major source of wealth for a small elite, leading to widespread corruption and political conflict. Transparency International has consistently ranked South Sudan as one of the world's most corrupt countries due to issues like embezzlement, misuse of public funds, and bribery. One of the main challenges facing South Sudan is the lack of government oversight and a functioning legal system. Public officials have been accused of siphoning billions of dollars from the national treasury with little or no consequences. In many cases, powerful individuals use their positions to accumulate wealth, often at the expense of the general population. This has led to severe economic inequality and a lack of access to basic services for much of the population. South Sudan's citizens have paid a high price for this corruption. The country faces extreme poverty, food insecurity, and inadequate infrastructure, making life difficult for millions of people. The ongoing civil conflict, fueled in part by competition over resources, has further worsened the situation and made it nearly impossible to address corruption effectively. At number 2, we have Syria. Syria's corruption issues are deeply intertwined with its ongoing civil war, which began in 2011. The conflict has created a power vacuum in many parts of the country, allowing government officials, militia groups, and business elites to exploit the chaos for their own gain. The Syrian government, led by President Bashar al-Assad, has been accused of numerous corruption-related practices, including bribery, cronyism, and the misuse of public funds. In Syria, corruption is pervasive at every level, from government officials to security forces and local authorities. Many officials are accused of profiting from the war economy, engaging in practices like looting, smuggling, and trading humanitarian aid. This has created a black market economy that benefits those in power, while the general population suffers from extreme poverty and limited access to resources. For Syrian citizens, corruption means having to pay bribes for basic services like obtaining identification documents, health care, or even avoiding military conscription. The economic situation is dire, with inflation, food shortages, and widespread poverty affecting millions. The war has devastated Syria's infrastructure, and corruption only compounds these hardships, making it incredibly difficult for citizens to survive or find stability. And finally, at number 1, we have Somalia. Somalia has long been considered one of the world's most corrupt countries, and it's frequently ranked at the bottom of global corruption indices. Years of civil conflict, lack of a centralized government, and poverty have created a lawless environment where corruption thrives. One of the biggest challenges facing Somalia is the lack of a stable government. Since the collapse of the central government in the early 1990s, Somalia has struggled with political instability, and various warlords and clans have controlled different regions. In this environment, bribery, extortion, and embezzlement have become common practices. Public officials and even law enforcement are often paid off by individuals or groups looking to exploit the country's resources. Corruption in Somalia is widespread, affecting everything from international aid to basic services. The diversion of aid funds intended to help people in need is a major issue, with many resources ending up in the hands of officials or local power brokers. This has led to a cycle of poverty as essential services such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure development remain largely underfunded or inaccessible. For Somali citizens, corruption creates severe hardships. Without a functioning legal or social support system, people often have to fend for themselves in a country where resources are scarce. Corruption has created a society where survival often depends on who you know or how much you can pay, rather than on fairness or merit. So there you have it, the top 5 most corrupt countries in the world. Each of these nations faces unique challenges when it comes to corruption, but all share issues of weak governance, economic inequality, and a lack of transparency. For citizens in these countries, corruption has a huge impact on their daily lives, often limiting access to essential services and opportunities. We hope this video provided some valuable insights into how corruption affects different parts of the world. If you found this topic interesting, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more in-depth videos on global issues. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.